This episode is brought to you by Paramount Plus. If you don't already subscribe to Paramount Plus, please use our affiliate link by going to talkthroughmedia.com/Paramount Plus. Using our affiliate link gives us a little credit, which helps us to keep bringing you great content. U.S. residents only.
Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Star Trek Lower Decks podcast. I'm Brian.
And I'm LT.
And Kyle is out this week, but he should be back for the season finale next week. We will be covering season 2, episode 9, as Ruthie loves to call that, the penultimate episode of season 2, titled wej Duj. But before we get started, we want to mention that this podcast is supported by our Patreon supporters. And you can become a Patreon supporter by going to patreon.com/Brian and Ruthie. And we have been putting out early access versions of the podcast to Patreon subscribers. And they got the episode last week way earlier than everybody else because I just ran out of time. So I did something I hadn't done before, which is basically put out to the regular podcast listeners the Patreon version, which I spent more time editing than I normally do. So it didn't sound all that much different. But this time I am going to be sending our episode out to Patreons with almost no editing at all, because that's all I have time to do this weekend. So, and I'm hoping that like reduces total time for me to get stuff out. So, but you guys don't care about that. You just want us to get the episodes out. So we do have a little bit of feedback for last week's episode in the form of a voicemail from none other than Mary Lou. So let's hear about that. So, of course, if you don't recall, last week's episode was season 2, episode 8, I Excretus. And that plays heavily in this voicemail when you say LT.
It is.
Yeah.
This is Mary Lou, but you knew that. I hope. I know I didn't call last week. I was a little busy. I was watching Star Trek Lower Decks on Paramount Plus, and now I'm calling in to talk through media with Brian and Kyle and LT. So, I was watching Star Trek Lower Decks, and, once I figured out the internet was, acting up, and I called my cable provider, and they said that I don't get my internet through my cable. So I says, well, who do I get my internet through? And then I called my grandson, and he called me, and he said, Grandma Lou, you just don't mix with the internet. So anyway, I was watching Star Trek Lower Decks. I was watching the episode, and I couldn't figure out why they called it I Excretus. And then I was laughing at the show, and I excretus myself. And then I had to, well, you don't want to know all the details. I excretus myself because I loved it so much. And I'm not a paid sponsor, just a happy user of Depends. 'Cause I've got a lot of living to do. Depends. 'Cause Lower Decks has figured it out.
Well, what can be said about that?
Thank you, Mary Lou.
I guess it depends. Yep, it depends.
Yes, it does.
All right, so I don't know what else to say about that, so I think we should just move on. Season 2, episode 9 is titled, and as I said before, I think it's wej Duj, which means it's, of course, a Klingon expression, and it means 3 ships. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory, actually. Written by a first-time writer of the show, executive story editor, and former actress. I looked her up, Catherine Lynn, and is directed by Bob Suarez. And this is his 6th directed episode, much like last week's Kim Arndt. Bob has directed season 1, episode 3, Temporal Edict, season 1, episode 6, Terminal Provocations, one of our favorites from last season, season 1, episode 9, Crisis Point. That's, of course, the one that was
the movie episode.
Yes, the movie episode. Season 2, episode 3 will always have Tom Paris. And season 2, episode 6, The Spy Humongous. The description from ParamountPlus.com is as follows. Boimler tries to find a bridge buddy while the USS Cerritos crew has downtime during a long warp trip. Although there is a captain's log in the episode, no star date for it was given. So we don't know what the star date was. The air date was 11:06 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time on Wednesday, October 6th. So it was roughly at the same time or the earliest that you typically see these episodes. Literally popped up on my screen at 2:06 a.m. So it had a runtime of 26 minutes and 23 seconds, which is the longest so far of season 2. So I imagine that next week's is going to be longer. All right, LT, what did you give wej Duj?
Well, for my first score of a 10 for the series so far, I gave it a 10 out of 10 red alarms, or only moon people would understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Red alarm. Red alarm. Yeah, that was funny.
And like I said, even the Russian judge this week had to give it a 10. So
yes, the Russian judge is usually pretty much of a stickler on this show. So that says a lot. I mean, he gave a 9.9 last week, which is pretty darn good. But for the second week in a row, I also give it a 10. And I am going to say 10. We need another boomer. It stopped working. But there's a lot of different things I could say for this one. But
it's a bomb. It only works once.
Yeah, this was a fantastic episode as far as I'm concerned. I think that there was just a lot there. So, but I'll go more into that in my yeses. So, much like last week, I don't know what's going on, but we're not getting a lot of feedback for some reason. We only got one bit of feedback, and again, it's from Wes from Minnesota. Thank you, Wes, for getting in your feedback. And he seems to be the Russian judge the last couple of weeks. He says, this episode was great. I enjoyed it a lot, especially the Klingon scenes. I give this episode 9 purple blood-stained knives out of 10. So seems like he's holding a bit in reserve, much like you normally do, I guess.
Well, right. And that's one of those things, just this time, I had to relent. I had to go ahead and give it a 10 because for whatever I had listed as a not good enough was not enough to dissuade.
Yeah, I hear you. And the only thing that I have for a no is something that can't be blamed on the show itself. So, but I'll get more into that in a few minutes. All right. So let's move on to our yeses.
Yes!
Wes from Minnesota says the Klingon scenes, this was great. I enjoyed the Vulcan scenes too, but not nearly as much as the Klingon scenes. I would tend to agree on that. The Vulcan scenes, of course, didn't have a lot of emotion to them, which I guess is appropriate, I guess. But I found them amusing, but I found the Klingon scenes more amusing.
I think the Vulcan scenes had a lot of emotion for Vulcans.
Very true. And I thought that they were also, well, you get into it, so I'm going to let you get into
I'll get
it.
into it. I'll get into it in a minute.
Yeah. He also says, I loved the callback to Star Trek V. It's a personal favorite of mine. Yes, I know what he's talking about, and I will get into it in the Spot the References section, because I caught a lot of that stuff that I think specifically he's talking about. And we are in treat for another set of Spot the References that are 100% mine. I was actually going to try to use one of the other, YouTube channels for it, and I was just finding that it was taking too much time. So I just went ahead and said, oh, okay, screw it. I'll just start watching the episode and jotting them down as I go. So that's what I did.
And there were a lot of references to Spot.
Yes. Yeah, they were pretty blatant, and it was obvious what they were from. And others, they weren't as obvious, and you had to do some searching for them. So, but anyway, LT, what did you have for yeses this week?
Well, for starters, I had a big yes for the Klingons.
Mm-hmm.
That while we have seen Klingon ships and Klingon crews interacting with one another, this was just a little bit more. And the fact that we got to see what ensigns do on Klingon ships. I laughed a lot when it was like they were saying, oh, I've got to scrape the bottom of the worm barrel.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
They bring us more blood wine. The whole way the Klingon crew interacts with each other. And the fact that the Klingon lower decker was actually, shall we say, even wharfish as far as being what a true Klingon should be.
Yeah.
When the captain was kind of going out on a limb. So just absolutely loved the extra filler and the way that we've sort of known how Klingon ships are, that we got our lower deck version of it, and I thought it was excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And on a similar footing, I really liked the scenes on the Vulcan ship.
Yeah.
The fact when the captain was going, your lack of control and your loss of logic is an emotional outburst.
Mm-hmm.
That it was the whole scene to me with Mariner and Captain Freeman, except it was in Vulcan.
Yes.
And it was the quiet, metered, nobody raised their voice. And while your logic is impeccable, your lack of control is posing a problem for the rest of the crew. That made me laugh out loud harder than some of the other scenes.
Yeah.
Just the fact that we've got, this Vulcan crew, and we've got someone who is not being quite so Vulcan, and just the way they handled all of it. I thought it was funny. It made me laugh a lot.
Yeah.
I really liked the best part, though, was at the end.
Mm-hmm.
When it was like, Cerritos, do you need any further assistance? And Captain Freeman was like, no, but I really appreciate y'all coming to help. And he was like, okay. And whoosh, they flew away.
Yeah. Communication
and
is
again,
no longer needed.
Yes. If you need no further assistance, we'll be going. Whoosh. And off they went. The same thing with the Klingon scenes, the Vulcan scenes, I just thought were hysterical only because we've always wondered how life would be on an all Vulcan ship, and they gave us that shot, and I just really enjoyed it. I know you mentioned it, you're going to talk about it later, but I really got a kick out of the fact that Captain Freeman had her Ritos shirt on.
And I've got my disco shirt on to commemorate that.
So if they have a San Francisco for the California class, does theirs say Frisco?
Maybe.
I just think that's kind of a cool thing. To continue with the riff, the scenes on the Pakled clump ship Pakled, when they showed the Pakled lower deck guys, I'm sorry. I know previous episodes I'd said I think we've milked the Pakleds for about all we can get out of the series, but I thought it was hysterical this week, and the fact that the lower deck Pakleds were sitting around.
Yeah, I had a similar reaction to it. I thought, okay, what more can they get out of this? But turns out that there was more.
Oh yeah, there was more.
Yeah.
The scenes on the Pakled ship were funny, but that one shot of the Pakled lower decks just killed me. And I don't think we can talk about this episode without doing our nugget at the end with the Marvel close, the Borg lower decks.
Yes. I thought that was the funniest part of the episode by far.
I laughed for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I laughed out loud just because. I mean, that's something we've never really thought about, but in the whole theme of lower decks, when they showed it, I was like, oh, come on, you got to be kidding me. And just, like I said, just laughed out loud for quite a few minutes. And even though really you could make arguments of, well, that's not really a big part of the story or whatever, just the symbolism of what it was for what it was made me giggle. So
if anyone is arguing about that one, I pity you, because that one was hysterical, and
it really was.
Yeah, because I mean they had hinted at the Borg at one point in the episode, but they never played into the episode. But to get the Borg lower decks in, and I want to talk more about that when we get to the point where I talk about this. But it was one of those truly, I didn't expect this, and just bolt out laughing, just unable to control myself with the laughter. Just brilliantly played. Such a little thing, yet it was just hysterical.
It was funny. It was really funny.
Yeah.
And just as a final note, I had talked about, issues with writing and issues with plot earlier in the season. And it seems like Lower Decks tends to tighten up and always save the best writing and the best bits for the end of the run. They did that last season, and they're definitely doing it this season. That, McMahon said at some point, he said the last 3 are going to be really amazing. And so far he hasn't been wrong.
He did say it, and so far he hasn't been wrong. I just wonder what this next episode is going to be, and I am going to mention something about it in my not good enoughs.
Okay. And just to say it, yes, I did not talk about any of the Bridge Buddy bits. I loved them, but to me there was nothing else to say about it. I mean, I thought it was funny.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, I think those were mostly the comedic portions of the story, and they were good, but they were also, I mean, there was none that was I'd say better than any of the other ones. Although maybe the one with them climbing El Capitan might have been the best of the bunch, but we'll get into that in a bit.
Okay.
To a similar thing, I guess I'll start in the mine because it fits right into what you were just saying. This episode had a completely different style than the last one. And, several of the other episodes that we've had in this season, there weren't any bleeps, there weren't any sex parts that were blacked out. It was nothing like that on this episode at all. It was very just by the book. I mean, I think it was a TV-14, but the only reason why I could see it was a TV-14 might have had to do with killings on the Klingon ship.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't think there was anything else that would have required the TV-14. But I just thought that this episode, being in a completely different writing style than a lot of the other episodes, because of that, no sex, no swearing, no bleeping, no blackouting. It was still brilliantly funny and brilliantly written. And I was just very, very impressed. And
yeah,
I'll even go further and say that I could see, like, if he took out the bits or, maybe calm them down a little bit, they could just as easily fit into a TNG episode, like make them a little bit longer or add a couple more. I could see something like this being a TNG episode,
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought that it was just brilliant. So I loved seeing how the three ships were different. We talked a little bit about that, and the Pakled and the Borg were hysterical. So I agree with you on that. Especially the stupid Pakleds, I'm hungry. You should go get something to eat. You're smart. Oh boy, how do they even get anything done? That's the question that I have. I liked that we see Boimler get recognized by Ransom yet again, who calls Boimler the most organized officer on board, and I predict that he will be the first of our lower deckers to be promoted to lieutenant. Of course, his transporter clone has already been lieutenant junior grade, but I see the next episode where Boimler is promoted. And that doesn't mean he's going to, go off the show, but I could see him, next season having his own quarters and, kind of just moving up the chain. And maybe this next episode, something with Mariner will have her moving up. I don't know. Or maybe that'll happen like at a different time in season 3. But anyway, I could see it happening with her. I just don't, the evidence isn't there as much as there is evidence for it with Boimler. So what I could see, and my prediction is Boimler gets promoted at the end of the next episode, and his replacement on the lower decks will be Ensign T'Lyn from the Vulcan ship, and I could just see that. It just makes total sense. And to that, the thing that was really, I could totally see T'Lyn was almost like the Spock of the Next Generation. Not okay. That sounds funny, but basically, there's evidence to this later, but she was thinking just like Spock does, and that's what made Spock so exemplary an officer. And later in the 33rd century or whatever it is on Discovery, becomes this historical figure that is revered in Navarre,
right,
history, because she's making the leap beyond logic, and I think that is where that's like where true, I think, innovation comes in. It's this nexus of intuition with intellect, like logic with intellect, and she's going with her gut instincts, but backing it up with scientific, study.
Right.
So, I mean, look at what she did. She had an algorithm that not only regenerated like basically the shields on the Vulcan ship were failing, and not only did her routines repair them, they made them stronger than they were normally. I mean, what can you say about that? Like, just it's pretty impressive.
And she enhanced the sensor inputs.
Yes.
The sensor inputs.
The sensors, yes. And I talk about that and spot the references. Anyway, I didn't list a lot of things because there's too many things that I can say. There's very, very little that I can say bad about this episode. In fact, I can't think of anything bad that I can say about this episode. I do have something bad, but it's not about the episode itself. So we'll get to that because I want to get your take on that, your experience, because I know.
Right.
Well, we'll get into that in a minute. Okay, so
we shall.
Let's hear our no's. No! We did get a no from our listeners. So Wes had a no, and he said Boimler seemed like he struggled a lot. He should have found a bridge buddy before jumping all over trying to find out. What do you think about that?
Well, I would have to agree with Wes.
I would too.
For being the most organized officer on the ship, it seems like that he should have found a bridge buddy before all this happened. But just to temper this no of why I didn't count off for it, was his looking for a bridge buddy is what gave us a lot of the meat of the Cerritos side funny content.
Yeah, and
and we struggle with poor Bradward.
Yeah.
We look at Boimler and we go, oh man, because a lot of times he is the poor hapless guy that gets into trouble, and that's sort of his thing. And that's what we saw with his trying to jump in with everybody else's bridge buddies. And it was funny, but I still have to agree with Wes that it just seems like if he's so dang organized, he should have found somebody before he needed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it seems like Ransom would have been a logical choice for him to go to.
Yep.
So I do have to agree. And I would say, although Rutherford was hogging them a little bit by having two bridge buddies, but I would agree on the whole idea of it. I guess maybe he could have gone after Dr. Maglimo or something like
God.
that.
Yes, and they could have been cooking in the kitchen.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Since Dr. Muglimo loves food analogies, maybe he's a chef on the side.
Oh, you've got yourself in one pineapple. Yeah.
And just for another no, just to slide something in here.
Okay.
While we're talking about Ransom and Boimler, I think that even though it sort of snapped back at him at the end, I think that Ransom may see something of himself in Boimler, since it turns out that we found out that Ransom lied about being from Hawaii just to get in good with one of his previous commanders.
That is very observant of you. I think you're right.
So maybe our man Jack there sees a little bit of himself in Boimler, which would be an sort of an interesting juxtaposition if we see. I mean, we know that Boimler's got it in him. We've seen it before, and even before he became transporter clone. Boo! Every time we talk about his clone on the Titan, that's the soundbite that plays in my head. But, maybe Ransom was a Boimler when he was an ensign.
It makes me wonder if Ransom, we know that he was, was born on the moon, and I'm sure they have, artificial gravity on the moon, but I could see, like if you take into point the Expanse and stuff like that, how it's a low gravity world, basically. So, maybe he had to lift weights, stuff like that, to kind of make up for it. And maybe that's how like what I'm saying is maybe early on in his career, maybe he looked more scrawny like Boimler.
Maybe he was a scrawny, willowy sort of ensign, and that's
Exactly.
why he's such a workout guy now.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah. Yeah.
Could be, man. Could be.
Yeah. He's overcompensating for his past. Okay, so here's my no. And I want to get your take on it because I know you consume Paramount Plus through your Amazon channels. So I get it through Paramount Plus itself. And I am mad this week enough to give a no to Paramount Plus, not to the episode, because Paramount Plus at the end of the episode goes, and it doesn't matter whether you're on your set-top box or, your smart app or your tablet or phone or computer browser, what have you. It takes the end of the episode and it shrinks it down to the size of a postage stamp. So when this hysterical credits are running and we see the Borg, I get about 5 seconds of the Borg, and then it shrinks it down to about 1/20th the size of my screen. And, you have to like hit a certain part of the screen of that postage stamp to bring it back up to maximize it. And I just wish they would stop doing that, or at least, maybe like tack a little bit on the episode so that that doesn't happen. It just, oh my God, I get so sick and tired of that kind of stuff. Anyway.
Well, it's the old assumption that nobody wants to watch the credits. But
well, yeah, but my take on it is there should be a setting for it, or there should be even a setting that they have so that maybe, they can customize it so that, for this one episode where there's some important thing going on in the credits, don't do this,
Well, I will say that I watched this episode initially on my phone, and the Android app didn't do that.
Oh, okay.
But my Fire Stick does. And just like you said, it's annoying.
Yeah.
But I've gotten to where as soon as it gets ready to do its thing, I can hit the remote and pop it back big again. But it's something that they did from the CBS All Access days. And you're right, it is annoying.
Yeah.
Because if they would just take a moment, leave the screen full size, then they can make us, refer another episode that we really don't want to watch or some other series that they try to prompt us with. But, come on, leave it full size, guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just don't like when they do this. And I just wish that they didn't do it. So, all right. That's all I have for my nose this week. Let's move on to our not good enough section.
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough!
Again, Wes from Minnesota says, Shax. I wonder what caused him to be so angry whenever Bajor is mentioned. I can imagine something really must have affected him. And to that, I said, well, that's easy. PTSD. I mean, I don't think that's anger per se. I think that is trauma. That is PTSD. he suffered a lot of trauma during the occupation. And, maybe some of that is, vengeance and righteousness and whatever. But some of it reminded me of Abbott and Costello. There used to be in Abbott and Costello, there used to be a similar kind of skit where, like Costello would mention, like, say, Niagara Falls. It'd be
Niagara Falls.
Slowly I turn. Or
step by step.
Yes.
Inch by inch.
Yes. And whoever he was talking to would, kind of go insane. Or there was another one that was similar for the Susquehanna Hat Company, and it was just, anyway, there was just this kind of PTSD. He would do something that would cause PTSD. And, to me, I don't know if Mike McMahon used to watch Abbott and Costello movies, but like one of the channels in the Detroit area, Channel 7, Sunday mornings would play Abbott and Costello, and every Sunday morning, either before or after church, I would watch Abbott and Costello and get a kick out of it. And because I had seen the movies so many times, I could, anyway, but that's what I take that for. I think that there are probably a lot of Bajorans that feel the same way as Shax does.
And of course, I thought it was really funny that as soon as he said it, you saw everybody else in the room look at him with big eyes going, no, 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 shaking their heads and doing the across the throat, don't do that.
Yep. All right. That's all we have for listeners not good enoughs. LT, we talked a little bit about your not good enough, so let's discuss.
We shall. My not good enough, again, not so major as to ding the score, but the question that I have, and that I've had for a while, so why do the Vulcans still have an independent exploratory fleet when it's obvious from what we saw in this episode that the Vulcans are not so keen to explore? That their logic does not imbue them with a sense of curiosity in the same way that humans are curious.
Mm-hmm.
I had said this previously before we started recording. It's the same thing with, I remember a conversation between T'Pol and Archer, that Archer was like, well, that's a curious phenomenon. Why don't we go check it out? And, T'Pol was always, well, the Vulcans have not seen the logic in exploring strange phenomena.
Mm.
So it still goes back to, why do the Vulcans have an exploratory fleet if they don't explore?
Yeah.
And I know that several of the other major Starfleet or Federation members have maintained an independent fleet. I know Earth pretty much didn't, but I'm
we were talking
sure
about that.
Yeah, I'm reasonably sure that the Andorians still had the Imperial Guard, so they still had a home fleet. We know the Vulcans have the exploratory service, so they still have a home fleet.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know about the Tellarites.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know about any of the other groups. And the question was, well, why do the Vulcans still have their own fleet? Unless this is part of we want to maintain our autonomy while still participating in whatever Starfleet's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a holdover from the days of Vulcan is an independent planet and we're a member of your club, but we're not going to let your club do all our work for us.
Yeah, I tend to think that it is curious. I mean, maybe it is a question of, because it's Starfleet and because there was a Starfleet prior to the Federation, that of course we know because of Enterprise. I guess it explains why kind of all of Earth's fleet was kind of rolled into Starfleet. But I don't know. It
like
is
our fleet became the backbone of Starfleet, and the other member worlds just sort of joined on and contributed members and started helping out building ships, which we know that there is, canon lore to suggest that there were homogenous crews from other member planets. But for the most part, when we get to the quote unquote classical era of Star Trek, we saw, mixed species crews. So it was something, and I cannot remember where it was said, but somebody had said, well, if you have all of one species crewing a ship, they all tend to think the same. That the logical chaos, if you will, of having different species with different mindsets and different thought processes in a crew gives you the broadest spectrum of possibilities. Because I think that's something that Kirk would have said, is that he wants options. And while the humans have been the curious ones, it's good to have the Andorian, Tellarite, Vulcan, another race's perspective on the possible situation. Because we know how many times that Kirk had a plan, but it was Spock that came up with the details to pull it off.
Right. Yeah. And, we do know, like, for example, in DS9, there's that one episode with the all Vulcan Federation crew or Starfleet crew. So we do know that there are examples of like an all Vulcan crew. Right. But yeah, it's very curious. Like, unlike you, I can't think of another species within the Federation that emphatically does maintain a fleet. I know that the Andorians used to. I don't know if they still do by the 24th century.
Right.
I think they did in the 23rd, but that I don't know for sure. But anyway, it's interesting. That's all that needs to be said. It's interesting.
And the fact that they maintain their original ship designs.
Yeah. They're pretty much unchanged in the design for a long time to come. And did we see a Vulcan ship in Discovery?
I thought
we
so.
did. Yeah.
One of the discussions from a ship design standpoint that some friends of mine and I had discussed was that the Vulcans still like their annular nacelles. And I think it's a non-canon source now, but apparently there were some Earth ships that used the same sort of annular ring nacelles. And we found out it was not quite as good as the classic tube nacelles that we ended up seeing in the quote unquote classic Federation ship designs. But the Vulcans still like them, and the Vulcans still use them.
It is not logical to change the design.
If the design works, then the design is what we will use.
Well, I didn't write a not good enough in, but we were talking about something that made me remember, oh yeah, I wanted to bring this up, so I'll do it here. It has been suggested that this season we may see cetacean ops. And that basically suggests that if we're going to see it, it is going to have to be seen next week. So I want to bring that up. And if we get to see cetacean ops, then +1 next week. And if we don't, then boo Mr. McMahon for getting our hopes up.
Well, it'll continue to be one of the most teased references in Star Trek lore. We know there's a cetacean ops, but we've never seen it. We've just seen the signs.
All right. So let's move on to our feedback section and open hailing frequencies. All right, so we have 2 voicemails this week. The first is from Jeff, X-Force 11.
Hello, Star Trek fans. This is Jeff, X-Force 11, leaving my thoughts about the most recent episode of Lower Decks. So I had to catch this one early since I'm leaving on a trip and wanting to get the feedback in. But we get Lower Decks on Klingon, Vulcan, and just a smidge on a Borg cube, in addition to a Federation ship. And so this was a lot of fun seeing how things interacted and how Lower Decks really are on other ships. And looks like we may be getting a Vulcan ensign maybe on the Cerritos coming soon. We'll see. But I thought this was an interesting episode, and it just kind of firms up Lower Decks making things happen all across the universe. And I really appreciated that, and I appreciated Boimler getting his own guy that looks up to him there in the end as well. So I really appreciated this episode, and I really look forward to seeing what they're going to do for the season finale. All right, those are my thoughts. X-Force is out.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, X-Force 11, for your feedback this week.
And thank you for keeping the streak alive, Jeff.
Yep. It's gone back, I think, to Picard. So,
yep.
Picard season 1. So it's coming up on 2 years.
That's right.
Quite impressive.
Keeping the other side of the North Carolina I-85 power belt alive.
Joe DiMaggio has nothing on you, Jeff. I think that the Borg was quite funny. And I agree with you about the Vulcan ensign. It seems very much suggested that we're going to see. And where would they put her? Would they put her in science or engineering? I guess I'm thinking science. Like she would kind of be a
I don't know. I'd like to see her in engineering only because have we ever had a Vulcan engineer? I don't think we have.
We may have.
I don't know. I think most of the Vulcans we've seen have been in the science department.
There was a Vulcan on Voyager, and I know that he was a gold shirt, and I'm thinking he may have been and I'm not talking about Tuvok. I'm thinking he may have been an engineer. I don't remember his name. So,
and I don't.
Yeah,
I'm sure if there's somebody that's listening that knows, they will call us on it.
And I know that I believe the actual actor's name is Alexander Enberg, who is Dick Enberg's son, and by that very notion, it is also former showrunner and executive producer Jerry Taylor's son.
Okay.
He actually played 2 Vulcan engineers. He played Tarek on Star Trek The Next Generation and Vorik on Star Trek Voyager. I think the first one, Tarek, that was on the episode, strangely enough, Lower Decks of TNG. So
there's some strange symmetry there.
Yeah. Season 7, episode 15. And Vorik was seen more than once. But yeah, very, very, it was a recurring, we'd seen him on the show more than once. Ensign Vorik. Yep. So yeah, just rung a bell. So, but yeah, we have had them, but there has been that's the only one I can think of that was a Vulcan engineer. All right, so that's it for our first voicemail. Our last voicemail and last bit of feedback for this week is a voicemail from none other than Dwight Berman.
Hi, Brian, Quayle, and Lieutenant. This is a very disheveled Dwight Berman reporting for the Lower Decks. I'm very upset right now. I don't think my best girl, Mary Lou, liked my answers that I gave her, and I never got to see that shower curtain. Can someone maybe give her a call and maybe put in a good word for the Dwight man? I'd appreciate it. There might be some black licorice in your future if you do. Okay, but and sorry about my bellyache, and maybe you can edit this down in post. So I don't sound too desperate. Okay, all right. Quayle, I called the Sexy Time Event Horizon not for the act, but for that movie. You know the one with that guy from the Omen 3, and then the other guy from the OA on the Netflix. Yeah, that movie there. They had that scene at the end with the orgy, but it was real gory and stuff. That's why I said it was a less gory Event Horizon, and that's not just the Sexy Time. That's just what I compared it to. So anyway, on to this week's episode. Weed's Deuce. That gets a 10 Hawaiian benzites from me from this one. Even though we're back to titles, they don't make a lot of sense. I thought Deuce was 2. So, but there were 3 ships that they showed the Lower Decks on, and 5 if you count the Packlet guys in the Borg. I don't know who comes up with these names, but this is my favorite episode so far. I thought Beameraner's a Hawaiian thing was funny because doesn't anyone ever verify where anybody's from in the future? I mean, that one guy at the Benzite, I wouldn't think would be very likely Hawaiian, and that's why it's funny. Boyka just wanted a bridge buddy so bad, and he just wanted to have a buddy, so he lied. And then for the women in the future segment of the podcast, they haven't come up with a better way to deal with the trials of the monthly cycle. Mariner and Freeman bickering didn't seem to be a good look, and it maybe says something about Freeman's leadership. Sorry, wrong podcast. Go ahead and listen to Kim and James on Talk Through Media's re-binge Deep Space Nine for that one. They're very nice people. I like them. And anyway, I like the Klingons in this episode too, because they're not those Discovery weird-looking ones, and we get to see the Lower Decks on that ship. I always wanted to be a Klingon, but they might beat me up, and then I get a dishonorable death. And those dick cocks, they look kind of sharp, and I might hurt myself with those. And hey, anybody noticed that Talin girl looked kind of like the cartoon version of the girl from The Big Trouble in Little China? You know, the one that she was in the Sexy City show too. They were kind of funny because she was just talking and explaining things to the other Vulcans, and then they were like, "Hey, you're out of control." And Vulcans are funny like that. I think maybe they set and by the way, I think maybe they setting up maybe a new Lower Decker there too, because like at the end, well, with her getting reassigned to Starfleet, I don't know how I feel about this though. She might be a good straight man to the Mariner, but does that relegate Tenderford further? I might be reading too much into that though. Did anybody else have that thought though about her maybe joining the Lower Decks? I don't know. And oh, by the way, Freeman really likes the Doritos, huh? She got that shirt with the Doritos on it. I wonder if she's a Cool Ranch or a nacho cheese girl. Is Lower Decks selling ad space now? I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, I could talk some more about things, but I'm getting long and I'm babbling, and I miss my best girl, Mary Lou, and I'm sorry, Mary Lou, if I offended you somehow. I miss you, and kiss. Hopefully we'll hear from you. That's Dwight Berman reporting. Okay, bye.
Well, thank you so much, Dwight. And we get a 10 from Dwight. So basically 3 10s on this podcast or episode. And so I think the average score between the two of us and Dwight and Wes is 9.75. That's pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I would agree about the fact that the Benzite, and I don't think they gave his name, but definitely not a likely Hawaiian.
Well, you never know.
You never know.
There could have been a Benzite embassy in Hawaii.
Right. And, I'm sure that in the, future, look at Michael Burnham. She was raised on Vulcan, right? So that also is a good example of a different species being raised on a different planet. So I don't think that in the future that'll be that uncommon. And also, in Discovery, for example, that's probably very common.
Yeah. As far as the help, though, Dwight, if all you're giving out's black licorice, then no help from me, sir.
Because, of course,
black licorice is evil.
Black licorice is evil to LT.
Evil.
If it makes you feel any better, I haven't had any black licorice for quite a while, so I've been less evil. Anyway,
like I said, now cherry Twizzlers, we'll talk.
Oh, I like cherry Twizzlers. No disagreement on the cherry Twizzlers.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, cherry red vines, though, I don't care for. To me, they taste like wax, so very little flavor. And I got a kick out of your indirect reference to the rebinged DS9 podcast, because I want to highlight that because, of course, James and Kim will be covering Star Trek Prodigy. And if you consume this very podcast on a podcast player of your choice, you will be getting the Star Trek Prodigy episodes. We will be producing a separate feed for the Star Trek Prodigy episodes because, it's, a show made for children. So my belief is that it should have its own feed. But it be included on, both the Picard and the Discovery feeds because, pretty much everything that we've done is on the Discovery feeds, which I've still had thoughts about renaming it, but we probably won't. So we may do a separate Star Trek feed that would include the older Star Trek stuff, because I could see at one point, in addition to DS9, we may bring on some other shows. But anyway, no promises here. We've got enough on our plate. I believe that is it for our feedback for this week. And I guess before we get into Spot the References, I will go into our notes. So do we have any notes this week?
I think you had one.
I just said I got a kick out of Pack-Led Clump Ship Pack-Led. That was the only thing that I wrote down.
They have such lovely naming conventions.
Yes, they're naming geniuses. Okay, so let's get into the Spot the References section. It's a pretty long one. I think we've had longer ones, but this one, again, I think I mentioned earlier, is 100% crafted by yours truly, because it got to the point where it's just like, this is going to take less time. So, all right. So I said earlier that wej Duj means 3 ships. So obviously the Cerritos, the Klingon ship, which was what was it called? Cheetah, which I wondered if it was the, cheetah And then the Vulcan ship, I believe, was the Cheval, which makes me think, I believe horse, that's French for horse. So I'm wondering if that's what it was referring to. But anyway, I could be wrong. If somebody has a response to that, let me know. First reference is stratagema. That was mentioned. I believe it's been mentioned a couple of other times, but most prominently, we see it in The Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 21, Peak Performance. And that is an episode where the Enterprise and a derelict stargazer type ship called the Hathaway are put together, and Riker is captaining the Hathaway, and they're doing battle exercises, and they have this strategist, Sirna Kolrami, on the ship, who's a Zakdorn, and he is a grandmaster in stratagema. So Data plays him, gets beat by him, loses his confidence, and then essentially, quote unquote, beats him by working Mr. Kolrami to a very, very, very long stalemate. So, and it just, got Mr. Kolrami very frustrated to the point where he forfeited the game. So, anyway, it was a good one. He mentions built-in social structures. I'm seeing like Boimler does, which brings us into the Klingons, but he also mentions the Binars. The Binars are, we had heard them mentioned before, but they are, of course, from Season 1, Episode 15, 11001001. And they take over the Enterprise by, I guess was a problem on their planet, and they needed a ship with a mobile computer. So they downloaded all their stuff into the Enterprise computer, and then I guess whatever happened, and then they loaded it back. But anyway, on the Klingon ship, it's interesting that we see the lower deckers living in the hallway again. Although in the Cerritos, they have bunks. On the Klingon ship, they sleep in hammocks, which I think, again, is probably compatible with what we've seen Klingons sleep in before. We, of course, see chess, or hear chess mentioned. And chess has literally been mentioned on Star Trek. Almost every series has had chess mentioned in it at least once. Its first appearance was in the second pilot episode of TOS. I'm not sure what its like formal episode number is. I didn't look that up, but it's the second pilot of TOS. And that's Where No Man Has Gone Before. And in that episode, we see Kirk and Spock playing 3-dimensional chess. But we have seen 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional, and a few different other variants of chess played. A lute is also mentioned in the same scene. That is a stringed instrument mentioned by Kirk in TOS Season 1, Episode 25, This Side of Paradise. We have seen it being played by humans, Vulcans, Edosians, and Bajorans. The Edosians are a species that we see in the animated series. We also see the Hesperians, Block Calms, playing a lute in Season 2, Episode 7, Where Pleasant Fountains Lie. That's what the guy that was playing the lute, that's what he was playing. It was a lute. That's where Rutherford had to run to Billups to prevent his virginity from being lost.
That's correct.
We hear on the Vulcan side of things, and I think it's what brought the Cerritos out of warp. There is a big surge in metreon particles. And metreon particles have been mentioned a lot in Star Trek over the years. Some examples are Season 2, Episode 24 of Enterprise, titled First Flight. And then the next season, Season 3, Episode 21, E squared. There is metreon-charged dark matter in Discovery, Season 2, Episode 2, titled New Eden. And that is, we see that planet that is where the Earth people are on.
Right.
And there's like an asteroid field that's surrounding it. And those asteroids are about to crash into the planet and basically destroy it. And Discovery saves them. Well, anyway, those asteroids have metreon charged dark matter in them. So, and they mention in the episode that it might lead to another way to control the spore drive. How it would control the spore drive, I never heard a good explanation of how. It was mentioned in Voyager, Season 1, Episode 15, titled Jetrel. It was mentioned in Season 6, Episode 25 of Deep Space Nine, titled The Sound of Her Voice. And they were mentioned as part of the Riker maneuver in Star Trek Resurrection. And then...
Insurrection, sir.
What did I say? Resurrection? Why, thank you. Yes, Star Trek Insurrection. Anyway, that's funny. And Voyager, Season 5, Episode 20, Think Tank, they're also mentioned in that. I didn't write down the specific examples of where they were mentioned, and I didn't come up with all this stuff on my own, but I did research them. So, but I remembered that I had heard metreon particles more than once, so it was just a question of going back and doing some checks on Memory Alpha, and that's where I found all of this. So
it's another one of those favorite Technobabble excuses.
Yes.
Things.
Yes. We hear Klingon blood being mentioned as reddish pink, and that is a reference to how Klingon blood has been shown as being both red and pink at various times in the 55-year history. And we have, I believe, seen a few instances where it's been kind of red and pink. So, but anyway, we had seen it as red up until Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and the belief was that the censors wanted them to make the blood look less bloody, so that's why it was changed from red to pink in the Undiscovered Country. Pottery class. I mentioned the Abbott and Costello, Nantucket or Niagara Falls. Slowly I turn. And, but we have heard Boimler, back in Season 1, Episode 8, Veritas, when they're in that kind of holding thing before, the episode really gets underway and we think that there's a trial going on. Boimler is worried about missing his pottery class. So, now it could be that, and it could also be a reference to the movie Ghost, because there's that famous pottery scene from that. And that, of course, for Trek fans, is the movie that Whoopi Goldberg won her Oscar for. So could have also been a slight reference, indirect, to that. We first see our example of a Klingon Targ in Season 1, Episode 6 of Next Gen, where no one has gone before. Kor's Hound is mentioned at the Battle of Clocktakel Brocht. Hopefully I got that correct. And I didn't realize this until I did some research on it, but that is the same region of space that is mentioned in a few places in, for example, Star Trek Insurrection mentions it, and it's called the Briar Patch, and it's a region of space in Sector 441. So the Briar Patch is Klaktakel blocked, and Core mentions the Battle of Klaktakel Brocht, and that is mentioned in TOS. Well, it happens. Excuse me. It happens around the time of TOS, but and I didn't get the actual episode that it's mentioned, but it's mentioned in Deep Space Nine. It may have been the first Blood Oath where it's mentioned. Anyway, I did not get that reference down, but I know that Core was on Deep Space Nine, and he was the one that mentioned it. We talked about sensors. That is consistent with how Spock calls sensors. And we also had that Admiral Vassery, is that it?
Yep.
Yeah. Who also called it sensors. And that was in season 1. I want to say episode 6, I think. I didn't write that one down. Yeah?
And I was going to say, you did skip one other thing about the Briar Patch.
Oh, did I?
Yes, that it was we first heard it mentioned in Enterprise by our pal, Dr. Eric Sung.
Yes, I meant not to skip that, so thank you for moving back to that. Yes, Dr. Eric Sung, Dr. Noonien Sung is a descendant of him, and that is mentioned in Enterprise Season 4, Episode 6, The Augments. So he, I guess, coined it the Briar Patch. So I don't remember specifically why he called it the Briar Patch, but anyway. One of the ones that I caught right away, and I thought it was funny, was references, and Wes mentioned it earlier, but he didn't go into specifics, was in Star Trek V, Captain Kirk is wearing a shirt under his uniform, we see, and it says, "Go climb a rock." So we see Captain Kirk is the one that is climbing El Capitan, and he's the one that falls, and it's actually Spock that is wearing the rocket boots, and he basically goes and, speedily jets down and catches Kirk before Kirk falls. And anyway, so that was kind of a tribute to that whole scene. So that was kind of funny. They did kind of a variation on it. But I thought that all the pieces were there. So it was cool. The next one, I thought of this. In the holodeck, they're bickering between Freeman and Mariner. And it's mentioned that Freeman has cramps. And the one I thought of right away was that in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, McCoy treats Dr. Jillian Taylor, and he tells people that she has immediate postprandial upper abdominal distension. And later he tells Kirk that that's the medical term for cramps. So Boimler frantically tries to leave the holodeck from the arch, and that, of course, is first mentioned in TNG Season 2, Episode 3, Elementary Dear Data, and we'll come back to that one in a minute. We see a benzite, and benzites are seen in a few different places, but I just mentioned them in TNG. We see them Season 1, Episode 19, Coming of Age, and that is Mordok that is competing for a spot on at Starfleet Academy with Wesley Crusher. And then we later see Ensign, I think his name is Mendan, on TNG coming back, and he is there for season 2, episode 8, A Matter of Honor, which is an episode where Riker goes and serves on a Klingon vessel in an exchange program. Speaking of Klingons, we hear actually the Vulcan, T'Lyn, mentions Chadich. Chadich is mentioned first, actually. Picard becomes Worf's Chadich. Season 3, episode 17 of TNG, Sins of the Father. It's again mentioned in TNG season 4, episode 26 by Picard, reminding Worf that he was his Chadich in Redemption. And it is brought up by Mariner on this show, season 1, episode 1, Second Contact. And in fact, it's mentioned at the end of that season 1, episode 10, when Riker calls Freeman like his Chadich in the old days. No Small Parts is the episode for that. Hawaii, that's the second time that Hawaii has been mentioned on the Cerritos holodeck. In fact, season 1, episode 1, Second Contact, it was mentioned. We've seen Hawaii mentioned a few times. We see a luau. Tom Paris mentions having luau's on the beach. Voyager season 3, episode 14, Alter Ego. We see Rutherford playing with his Deep Space Nine model, which we see him getting earlier on in the season. Didn't write down the episode for that, but I want to say that was like season 2, episode 5.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was, actually. Yeah. Now, Star Trek 6 is mentioned a couple of times. I talked about T'Lyn being like a Spock type, and that is because she specifically says logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. We see in Star Trek 6, Spock says this to Valeris. And of course, the Klingon captain recites Shakespeare's "Cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war," just like General Chang did in that movie.
Yep.
The captain mentions Klingons joining Starfleet. That's obviously a reference to Worf. The one that I couldn't figure out, and if anyone can illuminate me on this one, and LT and I talked about it before we got started, I could not remember any Klingons that were attending Bajoran academies. So if anyone knows of anybody, let me know. Maybe it's Alexander. I don't think so, though.
I don't know.
Yeah. Mariner and Freeman seem to be playing an updated version of Clue. And LT, you talked about this earlier, but Captain Freeman is wearing a blue T-shirt that says Ritos, which is a throwback to the Discovery crew wearing T-shirts that say disco on them, much like the shirt that I'm wearing right now, which is dirty. Now, when it's red alert, we see a bunch of people, scurrying about, and I did some frantic writing down of what we're seeing. We see some more Ambo Jitsu players. We see someone in a Robin Hood uniform, which may be a reference to Cupid. We see a dude, I said dude, smoking a pipe, and that may be a reference to Sherlock Holmes. And if that is, that would be a reference to Elementary Dear Data again. We see two women wearing exercise clothing similar to what Deanna and Dr. Crusher are wearing when they are stretching. I think that was in The Price.
Think so.
Yeah, when they were talking about Devanani Rao. Anyway, didn't write down the episode, but I know that's in season 3. Next thing is that someone's in a Napoleon uniform. I couldn't remember specifically where that was from, but I think that's what it was because I see two more people in
I took it,
French.
I took it, yeah, but I took it as a like a Royal Navy uniform.
Mm.
Like, was it the start of insurrection when they're on the sailing ship, or was that?
Yeah, you're right. That's what it is.
Because when you talk about Napoleon uniform, I was thinking they've got a bicorn hat and the short blue jacket. So I'm thinking Age of Sail Royal Navy, which would be another TNG movie reference.
Yeah, you are right, LT. That is correct. I correct myself. So I'll give myself a...
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough!
Or simply... or maybe even...
Incorrect.
But we've corrected ourselves because that is, of course, a reference to Star Trek Generations, where we see Picard and I think Riker are wearing that kind of uniform, and we see Worf walking the plank. So that's part of Worf's kind of initiation to get a promotion to lieutenant commander. You're right about that. I don't know why I was thinking it was Napoleon. We also see two people wearing dresses with big collars. So
they're like Ren Fair dresses or Elizabethan dresses.
Yes.
With the big collar ruff.
Yes. Now, what would that possibly be then if it's not? I don't know.
Well, that would, to me, that might arguably go along with maybe the Robin Hood. I know the time frame's off, but
maybe
how many times, or it could have just been like the episode we just talked about with it left my head, Mr. Virginity.
Oh, Billups. Oh, Billups. Yeah, the Ren Fair stuff. Yeah.
That's kind of what it struck me as.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I don't know why I've drawn a blank on Billups, but it just seemed to me that it was everybody doing their off time. So you suddenly had everybody coming out, and you could also say, well, everybody wearing their shorts and Hawaiian shirts running around. So
I did not confirm this one, but the last thing that I have is that Barnes is wearing something similar to what we saw some of Wesley's friends wearing when they're playing in the snow. And I think that's from the Naked Now. But I'm not 100% sure of that.
When they were going skiing or
yeah. Anyway, I seem to remember that one of the people that was friends of Wesley was wearing that kind of thing, a pink outfit with pink earmuffs. So
yeah.
Anyway. That's it for my spot the references section. There were probably more, but I did a very in-depth once over of the episode, just doing that and nothing else. So hopefully I caught most of them. All right. So anyway, that's it. And let's move on to Shipwide announcements. We've got a few. I want to say actually something in the about this episode. I believe that T'Lyn was named after this episode's writer, Catherine Lynn. So now I don't know what the T might be. Maybe she has a sister or mother or brother or something with
because
a T.
That's the way Vulcan names are.
Exactly. So maybe the T is significant, maybe it's not, but certainly the Lynn has got to be named after her. And this is the first ever episode that is a Klingon title. And, we've had episodes that have been in Latin, for example, and some that have been in, other human languages, but I don't believe we've had any examples that were in a non-Earth language. So, all right. So we've got news, and most of these are attributed to Wes Huntington again. So thank you, Wes. I did put in a couple of things. We'll get to those. The IATSE members have voted to strike. However, both the union and the MPTP, which is the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, are at the bargaining table hoping to avert such a strike. So that's good. They're talking, and we like to see them talking. So hopefully that will get worked out, and they will not go to strike, because we've had enough delays in the last 2 years that we don't need a strike. So
Yep. I'll agree with that.
Next is LeVar Burton. I'm sure I don't need to explain who LeVar Burton is to our listeners. He has been named Grand Marshal of the 2022 Rose Parade. So that is quite an honor for him. Of course, we will see him on morning TV during the parade. I used to watch that every New Year's Day when I was a kid. Good for him. Next thing, and I could swear that we have talked about this before, but I went through our show notes for several of the episodes for this season, and I couldn't find it. I didn't go through the last 3, but I couldn't find it, so maybe we haven't talked about it. But Nana Visitor, who of course played Kira from DS9, is writing a book about women and Star Trek. It's called A Woman's Trek, and it will dive deep into the women of Trek, both in front of and behind the camera. And so she is writing a book. I know she talked about it. I want to say she talked about it on Star Trek Day or around Star Trek Day.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So that's why I could swear that we talked about this, but I don't know. Maybe it was something that we talked about and we just didn't put it in the notes, but
well, we have now.
So. Yeah. But it's cool, and I did see a little video on that when it was first announced, and it looks like it's a great project for her. And of course, Ruthie was able to interview Nana Visitor back in 2019 at SoonerCon. So we're hoping we're going to be able to do something similar when this book comes out, but we'll see. We have something kind of, if we're able to do it, we have something kind of special planned for that. So anyway, so it will dive deep into the women of Star Trek, both in front of and behind the camera. So like, for example, Dorothy Fontana, who was big writer on show, and, producers. I mentioned Jerry Taylor. I'm sure she'll be involved. Anyway, so I look forward to that. I'm sure that that's going to be quite a good book. So the next book that we'll talk about, there's a few here. Coda Book 1, Moments Asunder, is out, and that's from Dayton Ward. And this is the first book in a trilogy of books that will end a 20-year post-DS9 Voyager Nemesis relaunch series. And there's been a whole kind of like universe of books, and this was kind of started before Picard came out, so it doesn't follow that timeline. It follows its own internally consistent timeline. But I know that a lot of people have raved about that book series. I've never had a chance to read any of those, but I hear it's good. So that's the first book, and that one's out. There's a book 2 that's actually slated to come out later this month. So next is Brent Spiner's book. It's titled Fan Fiction, a Semi-Autobiography, will be hitting shelves on October 12th. And that is parts of the book will include his TNG co-stars. And to that end, the audio book version will include some of the TNG cast. Oh, that's cool. I'll have to get my hands on that. I love listening to audiobooks. So we had wondered, I think we took this out of the podcast when we talked about this, but there was some, maybe we did, maybe we didn't. The Center Seat is the multi-part documentary series that is being produced by the Nacelle Company, who also produces Gates McFadden's podcast.
Mhm.
We had heard that it was going to come out around the time of the anniversary of, the 55-year anniversary of Star Trek. Apparently, it will be coming out later this year on the History Channel, and there's been a trailer. I haven't had a chance to see that trailer, but apparently they are at New York Comic Con, which is going on right now. I don't know when they are having their panel, but they are there, so I'll have to watch that trailer after we're done today. But speaking of New York Comic Con, and we ended up recording this on Saturday instead of Friday, we were talking and chatting, and we delayed our start long enough to get the trailer of Discovery Season 4 came out before we started this episode. So LT and I both got a chance to watch it, and we only watched it the one time. What did you think?
Well, I think it looks pretty exciting. It looks like we're going to have some old friends returning to the crew.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like it's going to be another strange anomaly season.
Yeah, it does look like another strange anomaly season. But the trailer looked really good. I thought
the trailer looked super.
Yeah, I am looking forward to it. I don't know what else can be said. Looking forward to being able to podcast with Ruthie again. And that's the season returns November 18th. So I will get a little break of Star Trek and podcasting about Star Trek for a bit, because I won't be regular on the Prodigy podcast, but that's good because I need to regenerate a little bit, go in my Borg chamber. But yeah, so I look forward to it. I will watch the panel as soon as it's out on YouTube. Maybe out right now. I don't know. I know that there was also a panel for Prodigy, and supposedly for the audience attendees, they got to watch, I believe, the first episode, maybe the first two, I don't know, but they're getting a sneak peek of the show for Prodigy.
Ooh.
Yeah, so lucky them. One thing that I wanted to mention, and it was something that I didn't know, but I saw that Wes put it in the show notes here. Saturday Night Live kicked off its 47th season last Saturday on October 2nd with a brand new Star Trek sketch starring Owen Wilson as Jeff Bezos, and parodied both his Blue Origin rocket ship company and Star Trek. And that was probably inspired by the fact that William Shatner will be on the next launch. So we'll talk about that in a second. But it was called Star Trek Ego Quest. And in addition to Owen Wilson, it had Owen's brother in that, Luke Wilson, playing Jeff Bezos' brother. And it had other billionaire ego types, I guess you could say, Richard Branson and Elon Musk out there with their own ships. And we see Elon Musk kind of flying something that looks like a Star Wars cruiser or something. That was funny. And we also see the oldest current person that's been in a spaceship, Wally Funk, who will keep that until the 12th when
Shatner goes.
When Shatner goes. And he is scheduled to be aboard the New Shepard NS-18 on October 12th. he says, commenting, "I'm Captain Kirk and I'm terrified." So I don't blame him. So,
But think about it. Isn't he going to be the first Star Trek cast member to go to space, to actual space?
well, other than he'll be the first one that's alive.
Live. Well, yes, we know that Jimmy Doohan's ashes made it to orbit. But
Yeah. And was Roddenberry supposed to go up there as well? I don't know, but I know Jimmy Doohan was supposed to. But anyway, the thing I was going to say about that Saturday Night Live sketch is it was hilarious. I thought it was really funny. So, but yeah, so that's it for our news this week. LT, why don't you take us on out and tell people how to contact us?
all right. Well, to submit your theories and feedback, go to talkthroughmedia.com/feedback, where you can submit your text or audio. You can leave us a voicemail at 216-232-6146. You can email us. That's lowerdecks@talkthroughmedia.com. You can also post your feedback in our designated episode thread on our Facebook group. That's www.facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. The deadline for Lower Decks Season 2, Episode 10 will be our regular day and time, Friday, October 15th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. If you would like to contact us, you can contact us at Twitter or Instagram at Star Trek TTM. A great way you can support us is to share us on Twitter and Facebook. If you go to facebook.com/talkthroughmedia, you can share the posts of the podcast from that group. You can also write us a review there. You can subscribe to the Talk Through Media YouTube channel. That's where you'll find our new episodes before anyone else. The YouTube channel gets the podcast before it goes to all the aggregators. So if you want to be the very first, you can sign up there and click the bell to get notified. Remember to subscribe to us in Apple Podcasts or the podcast client of your choice. While you're there, give us a rating or review. We like ratings and we like reviews.
Yes, we do.
You can also check us out at podchaser.com. There, you can leave a review for individual episodes or the entire podcast. One of the biggest ways you can help support us is through our Patreon. We would like to sincerely thank our Patreon supporters, James Robbins, Kim Vogley, Brian Shiro, Christoph Leckleitner, Michael Carrier, Stephen Chambers, Jeff Gentry, Robert Kaiser, Clint McCollum, Mike, Trey Whipke, me, and the Quail. Comic Adams.
And the missing quail. So all of our episodes from Talk Through Media podcast can be found on the Talk Through Media all-inclusive feed, which also contains the Rebinge DS9 podcast and the Walking Dead Talk Through. And speaking of that, Kyle, LT, and I are doing the Walking Dead Talk Through right now. And we released earlier season 11, episode 7, and then covering the first episode of season 2 of World Beyond, which was, at least in my case, surprisingly good. Because I haven't liked the show to date, and I was kind of pleasantly surprised that I actually enjoyed this one this time out. And we will be covering for this coming week, the season is cut into thirds. So the first third, its season finale is this week. So it'll be season 11, episode 8, and season 2, episode 2 of World Beyond. And then next week, after that, or I should say 2 weeks from now, I guess, we'll be discussing season 7, episode 1 of Fear the Walking Dead, and season 2, episode 3 of World Beyond as Fear the Walking Dead Talk Through, which basically just means that the episode goes out an additional feed and changes the artwork. We will be covering next, of course, the season finale of Lower Decks for season 2. We don't know the title of it, but it's season 2, episode 10. We don't know who has written it, but it may be Mike McMahon, and directed by I'm guessing, according to the pattern, it's probably Jason Zarek, because whoever seems to do, they seem to be in every third episode, so that would mean Jason Zarek for this time. And we don't have a description. So until next time, I'm Brian.
And I'm LT.
Peace and long life.
Live long and prosper.